Hey everybody, welcome to the briefing room on this Thursday. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. White House correspondent Tara Palmieri, Justice reporter Jack Date is here with us. Full team coverage right now of this ongoing bomb plot story that's continued to escalate and unfold today as law enforcement officials are now poring over a treasure trove of forensic evidence from, now we've just learned, 10 bombs, attempted bombs, alleged suspicious packages. You're seeing some images of them there. 3 more this morning found, one at actor Robert De Niro's home in New York, 2 more addressed to Vice President Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden. And authorities, as you just saw in New York, wrapping up a briefing. I want to bring in our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, who was tracking that briefing. Pierre, give us your headlines from what we just heard from law enforcement officials in New York City on what new developments there are in the investigation.
Well, we just heard from the Postal Service that they've not uncovered any new devices in the last 8 hours or so. So that's obviously good news. The bad news is that they cannot guarantee that there are still not more devices, more suspicious packages somehow in the pipeline. They're looking at that possibility, and also the possibility that more could still be manufactured. So law enforcement officials from around the country in multiple locations on both coasts and in Florida as well are running down leads. The key is that they have these devices intact. They have been sent to the FBI laboratory down in Quantico, and the painstaking work of dissecting these devices and looking at each component and trying to figure out where they were purchased and backtracking from there to try to figure out who constructed these devices. And then the other thing I think is critical today is that the Postal Service, and seeing how the devices that move through the mail, where they originated from, that's going to be key to solving this case.
Pierre, I want to ask you about something that caught my ear in that press conference. A number of officials referred to, the still unclear motive of individuals involved here. Do you have any indication yet of whether this is a group of people, a single person? What's the working theory you're hearing from your sources?
Well, right now they don't know if it's one person or more than one person. Typically, in these kinds of cases, it involves one person. But until they can get those critical clues and wrap this up, they won't know for certain. Law enforcement officials are, again, taking every precaution in this investigation. And I think they were emphasizing today that they're treating these as live devices, potentially dangerous devices, and working overtime, trying to figure out exactly what we're dealing with here. And again, whoever did this is still at large, and that's the ongoing and major concern.
All right, senior justice correspondent Pierre Thomas, we know you're working your sources on that. We'll have much more coming up on World News Tonight. Thanks for that reporting, Pierre. And Jack Date, you have been all over this as well with some interesting expertise today that I've heard from you about what the investigators at Quantico are actually doing. They can learn a lot from just looking at a wire.
So they have 10 devices here, and so they can learn a tremendous amount from exploiting these devices, looking at the components, looking at where they were where they were purchased, so that they can run down pipe and timers and wire and figure out where were these bought, and then look at store video, things like that. They can also look at the devices themselves and examine them for forensic evidence like DNA. Mm-hmm. So if the person so much as sneezed on the device while he was making it, that might be critical evidence. There's tape heavily used in the devices, so the tape leaves things like fingerprints oftentimes on the sides of the tape. Stamps also have adhesive. The sealing on the envelopes, if there's saliva on that, or any other DNA markings, those can be critical pieces of evidence in trying to run this down.
And we see, as we're seeing some of these images, that the return address on the packages was from Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the former Democratic Congresswoman from Florida. We know that authorities have said that they don't think she actually sent the packages. But what are we learning about how they were delivered? Do we know whether they were by courier? Did they go through the Postal Service?
It appears at least some of them were in the postal system.
Were they from Florida?
Well, authorities are still being a little bit cagey about the actual point of origin, if they determined it or not. But we know that some of them were in the postal system. We know, for instance, a package to Maxine Waters, one of those was found in a postal facility in Los Angeles. 2 other packages were found in postal facilities in Delaware.
One was in Maryland as well.
Right,
that was
those
going
addressed to Joe Biden. The Maryland one was a postal screening center for congressional mail.
Right.
That was another Maxine Waters package. So clearly they've had interaction with the postal system. They've been in there.
Eric Holder's package actually never made it to him. It was rerouted back to Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and that's why there was some confusion about whether she actually had a package directed to her. So.
And the White House, Tara, is watching all of this as the investigation intensifies somewhat nervously. They're not sure, they don't know any more than investigators do who is behind this. Certainly the president has been implicated in this, in that all the targets are people who have been critical of him. And so he has toned down his rhetoric, but the White House is sort of taking a very cautious line about how to respond to this.
You're right. You're hearing them be very careful about it, although I heard some news spin this morning distancing the president from the attack, saying, if the president is responsible for this attack, then that's the same thing as saying that Bernie Sanders was responsible for the attack of for the shooting at the congressional baseball game where Congressman Scalise was injured. But the findings from the investigation could be politically damaging for the president if it appears that this person was a die-hard MAGA fan, thinking that he's doing it on behalf of the president, someone who had attended the rallies or was just felt that he was executing the president's mission. Because these people that were sent packages were on the president's, Democratic hit list, essentially, his political hit list.
Attack at a lot of these rallies.
Investigators are being careful not to get into politics.
Right,
and you heard the police commissioner talk about that at the top, that they don't want to be involved in the politics of this. The mayor alluded to it as well. It is really critical that they find this individual or individuals that are responsible for this and put a stop to it. But the law enforcement, as a general matter, just doesn't like to be in the middle of the political wrestling match. They just want to stop the crime.
But inevitably, we will get background information on this individual, and that may point to a political leaning, which it appears.
Right, so everybody seems to be anxiously waiting for that headline, with the certainly with the campaign backdrop of all of this. The Homeland Security officials, Jack, not only dealing with this situation around the country, but also looking at the southern border. The president's been talking about it. It's now become a top issue in the campaign. And some news today that the president, first of all, he tweeted to the caravan, which has been amassed there and working its way up through Mexico. But his defense secretary, Jim Mattis, also signaling he's expected to sign now an order to send active duty military, some up to 800 to 1,000 troops to the border. I want to bring in our Pentagon reporter, Louis Martinez, for a little bit more on that. First, Louis, break down this headline for us. Active duty military going down. There's already 2,100 National Guard there.
That's right, Devin. The president earlier this year sent down 2,000 National Guardsmen to provide support to the DHS mission along the border. But today, what the president, I guess the Pentagon is going to be acting on, is the president's request to send active duty troops. We've heard him for the last week or so talking about them sending the military as opposed to the Guard down to the border. And by what he means by the military, he means active duty troops. Now, we know that there's this law that goes all the way back to after the Civil War that U.S. troops, active duty troops, cannot participate in law enforcement duties, and that is still going to be the case. So what are these U.S. active duty troops going to do? They're going to be providing direct logistical support, technical support, and transportation support to the CBP, Customs and Border Protection. They're not going to be interacting with any migrants across the border. They're not going to be carrying out any law enforcement duties. They are there strictly to provide direct support to CBP, thereby freeing them up. One of the things that we've heard about today is how they're going to be building tents, essentially housing for the Customs and Border Protection personnel that may be sent to the border long term. So this is something that Secretary Mattis is expected to sign as early as today. You brought up that number 800 to 1,000. That's one possibility. It all depends on how much Mattis agrees to, so it could be even higher.
Okay, Louis, stand by. Let's go to the other side of the border, south of the border now, where our Marcus Moore is in Pajijiapan, Mexico. That's where the caravan of migrants, several thousand now, have continued to work their way toward the U.S. border. Marcus, thanks so much for joining us. Give us the lay of the land today. How many migrants are you with, and where are they headed?
Well, Devin, it's good to be with you this afternoon. We are here in the city center of Picahiapan, which is a town of about 50,000 people, and we've really seen a flurry of activity here since this migrant caravan that we've been following now for several days has come to a stop here. This is where most of the migrants from Central America will be spending the rest of the day. Their plan was to get to this city and rest here before they continue farther to the north. And what we have seen is how a community, not only here in Picahiapan, but also from across Mexico, has come together to help these migrants. Right now, this is a group of nurses from Guadalajara and nuns that have been treating the migrants, their feet. We have seen some incredibly disturbing images of people with serious foot injuries. There was a guy with a badly blistered foot. He was being seen there. And Devin, very quickly, I want to show you what else we see here in the city center of Picahiapan. Just so many people, hundreds upon hundreds of men, women, and children are here finding whatever shade they can. And because it's incredibly hot here, we're talking about temperatures approaching 90 degrees, and I can't tell you how humid it is out here. And these are the conditions that they have been enduring as they have been marching now, thousands of people from Central America through Mexico, through the state of Chiapas where we are this afternoon, hoping, Devin, to make it to, many of them hoping to make it to the United States. But this is what we see right now. This is where most of the members of that caravan are resting right now and waiting until they continue on in the morning.
And Marcus, I know you've been hearing from many of them that they are determined to get there, to get to the U.S. Do you get the sense that any of the folks there have been hearing the president's rhetoric on this? Are they aware of the threats to send the military in, of the president's tweets and the like, that he won't allow them to come in, quite simply?
Devin, they have been hearing that, but it hasn't deterred them. I mean, just look around, and you see the men, women, and children who are here, despite the threats that they've heard from President Trump and the White House. They have heard these things, but they're not worried about it. They still say that they need to get away from the violence and the corruption in their native countries, and also they're looking for opportunities that they think that they can find in the United States. But Devin, interestingly, I talked to one man from Honduras. Por favor. There's a gentleman there who's bringing some water. I don't want to get in the way of their operation here, but there was one gentleman from Honduras who said that he really isn't trying to make it to the U.S. He would prefer to stay here in Mexico. He feels like he has a future here in Mexico, although he would like to make it farther north. And I thought that was very interesting because the assumption is that most of the thousands of people here want to get to the U.S. And Devin, you asked about the rhetoric. There was a group of young men from Honduras who we met along the highway here just outside Picahiapan, and I said the president has described many of you as rapists and criminals. They stopped me mid-sentence and said, no, that is not the case. We are merely looking for safety, and we are looking for opportunity, and that is why, Devin, we see them along the streets and highways of this region trying to catch a ride north.
All right, our Marcus Moore down there in Picahiapan, Mexico, with the migrant caravan as they work their way. Marcus, terrific reporting. Great to have you. Thank you so much. And guys, you know, this just seems like a sort of one of President Trump's former advisors, Tara, as you've been hearing, has called this a political gift to him. He loves seeing these images to sort of excite his base. And what we've really seen in the past week, a good effort at fear-mongering here.
Right. You've heard all sorts of theories floated. He claimed that terrorists originating from the Middle East were coming through the border.
There's no evidence of that.
And then admitted later there was no proof.
Right.
So, you know, he's obviously trying to politically capitalize on a crisis on the border. Let's not forget that there are still 2,000 National Guard down there from when he sent them over the summer. And these military servicemen that are coming down, they're just offering logistical support. So it may seem like a grand move and a strategic political move, but it's not.
No, I think as Louis alluded to, it's putting a soldier in a desk so that a customs agent can go in the field.
And let's put that to Louis before we let you go. Bring back in Louis Martinez at the Pentagon. Louis, we heard earlier in the week from our team at the border in California that officials there were worried about having too many cooks in the kitchen, too many people who aren't used to providing border security, too many troops and logistical support folks, if you will. Is there a sense here that this actually could be helpful to have active duty troops there now, practically speaking?
You know, one of the things that I was listening to Tara talk about there is that, and to Jack when he brought up about the service members filling out desks so that CBP could move forward. One of the things that I've heard now from several officials today is that this is designed to be a visible effort. Designed so that this is, they want to be seen helping CBP. How do you help them logistically? Well, you can move those trucks. You can see that, let's say they might move personnel closer to the border. And I think there might be some significance in how the administration is portraying this, that they want those trucks to be seen as U.S. military trucks that are transporting additional personnel to the border. They may want to be showing off that there are U.S. military personnel, construction teams that are building these tent areas for CBP personnel. So I think that that's one slight difference this time around. And I think there's also the language, right? I think when the president over the last week or so, when he's been talking about Guard personnel being there since April, he hasn't been touting their effectiveness. But I think he's always, at his rallies, he always talks about how big a proponent he is for the U.S. military. And by sending active duty troops there, he might be trying to create the perception that these active duty troops are doing more than what the Guard troops have already been doing, when in fact it may be just more of the same, but in a more visible fashion. And if I could just add a little personal note to what Marcus was talking there earlier, you know, I'm kind of struck by the fact of how Honduras is getting such play here. You know, I am Honduran, my family is Honduran, and when I was growing up, nobody knew where this country was when I was here in the United States. And now I'm just fascinated that everybody can talk about this country and roll it off their tongue. It's really fascinating to me to see how this small country in Central America has become a flashpoint for what's going on in this midterm election.
And a reminder that so many of our communities, our country, this ABC News is all interwoven with fine immigrants and immigrant histories. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the debate. Louis, thank you very much for that poignant note. Appreciate that and your reporting. Guys, this doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. President Tara not only talking about immigration, but he's starting to seize health care as a hot topic. He had a big announcement today at the Health and Human Services Department about drug prices, something that he's tried to seize on as Democrats have been going on offense on this in the campaign.
That's because Republicans aren't polling well on health care. That is something that my sources from internal polls in the White House and external polls show, that the Democrats just poll better on health care. Our polls show that as well. So President Trump, in a last-minute move, is obviously trying to make an appeal to voters that might be on the fence, showing that he's taking some decisive action. And
that decisive action today was a trip to HHS, where he announced that the department is now introducing a new regulation which will require that drugs administered by doctors at doctors' offices, things like cancer medicines, now have their prices pegged to what is paid overseas by foreign countries. Right now, the United States pays almost double what many foreign countries pay for those same drugs. So the president introducing and announcing a new regulation, and we asked Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar just how it's going to work and what it means for you. Take a look.
We demand to get the benefit of the discounts that pharma companies are voluntarily giving to economically comparable countries within our Medicare program for these infusion drugs that are some of the highest cost drugs in America for our patients in Medicare. This will save $17 billion over 5 years, and patients will save $3.4 billion out of pocket over 5 years from these changes.
And how soon do you expect this to take effect? And does it only apply to people who are on Medicare?
I'm sorry, I lost the audio there, but I think you were going to ask how soon will people see the benefit of these changes. What we're doing now is initiating a rulemaking process because we want to be open and transparent and get input from everybody about this. And we anticipate that this would take effect at the end of 2019 or in early 2020 is when people would start seeing the most immediate benefits of these savings. Now, of course, pharma can always reduce their prices any day.
All right, of course, it's an industry that you're very familiar with. You are a former executive with the drug company Eli Lilly. They're out with a pretty stern response to the president's announcement today. They said, quote, they have serious concerns with this being the pharma lobby. They say what you are doing amounts to, in their words, foreign government price controls in the American system. What's your response?
Well, these aren't foreign government price controls in the American system. These are discounts that pharma companies are voluntarily giving to the French, to the Germans, to the British, to the Japanese, and are refusing to give to the American people. And I find that unconscionable. We're not even asking to get all the way down to what they're giving to these countries. Over 5 years, it would reduce to be about 126% of what these other countries are being given by pharma companies. So I don't understand the criticism at all. It's an untenable position.
A few more questions for you. The administration also has done a number of moves on healthcare lately, including recently unveiling a new plan to allow some shorter-term healthcare plans at cheaper rates for people to buy outside the Obamacare marketplaces. A number of critics of this process say these are junk plans. They don't have to comply with the rules of Obamacare, like guaranteeing protections for pre-existing conditions or covering pregnancy. What's your response to that? Is it a disservice to people buying some of those short-term, non-compliant plans? Are they actually getting coverage for what they're paying for there?
I think it's a disservice to people to not let them choose the type of insurance that they want to buy and that they can afford to buy. We have the Affordable Care Act plans. Those are available. There are subsidy programs in place if people want those. But for people who do not get a subsidy, who cannot afford the unaffordable Obamacare plans, the president is bringing other options to the table for them so they can have lower cost options to get some forms of insurance. These short-term limited duration plans, let's remember, were in place the entirety of President Barack Obama's tenure until the last minute when they were shortened to only 3 months because they wanted to force people into the unaffordable Obamacare exchanges. We're simply expanding their availability out again, and in fact, we're enhancing the consumer protection warnings for people as they go into and buy these products.
All right, I want to ask you a little bit about some of the consumer protections in place under Obamacare. Hot topic right now, pre-existing conditions on the campaign trail. The president's talking about it. The candidates on both sides are talking about it. As you know, there's a lawsuit underway right now by 20 Republican state attorneys general suing to end Obamacare, declare it unconstitutional, get rid of those protections. Do you support that lawsuit, and do you have a plan to keep pre-existing condition protections if a judge decides that the law is in fact unconstitutional?
So the issue in that litigation is a legal question of whether various provisions are actually unconstitutional given the Supreme Court's rulings on Obamacare. It is not a policy position of the administration or the president. The president has been 100% clear. He will not sign a repeal and replace package for Obamacare that does not adequately protect individuals who have pre-existing conditions. There are many ways to do that, but he will not sign any package that doesn't protect people with pre-existing conditions.
So you're making that commitment here. Finally, sir, before I let you go, there's been a lot of speculation of late that you could be on the president's short list to replace Jeff Sessions as Attorney General. I know you've said you're very happy in your position there, and certainly don't want to get ahead of the president, but is Attorney General a position that you could see yourself being interested in at some point?
I hope you can see from the announcement that I made today with the President of the United States and my commitment on these issues that I am in my absolute dream job and just loving every minute of it.
All right, Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar, thank you so much, sir, for coming on ABC News Live.
Thank you.
Okay, the secretary there not ruling it out. He said he's happy where he is. That doesn't mean he can't change jobs, so we shall see. Election day around the corner, Tara, you know that's when the president is expected to do a bit of a shakeup in the cabinet there, so we'll see. Finally, speaking of the election, we are 12 days away. We're counting it down here at ABC News. We have full team coverage out on the trail. A lot of activity this weekend and into next week in the home stretch. Tara, you're hitting the trail with the vice president. He's actually doing a pretty interesting West Coast swing, and you have an exclusive interview with him coming up.
Yes, I'm going out with the vice president tomorrow. He's on, doing a southwestern tour. President Trump also did this same tour as well. New Mexico, Arizona. He's hitting the border states with a message on immigration. I was out in Arizona last week, and from the people I spoke to, immigration is a very hot topic. They care about it. They want this border secured. So he's speaking to a crowd that takes to this sort of issue, and we'll see if he can elicit the same sort of response that the president can, but we know his crowds are not quite the same.
And we know that he is going to spotlight that issue, obviously visiting 2 states where early voting is underway. We're seeing some pictures here. There's been near record turnout in many places this midterm season in voting. And by the way, more than 30 states now have early voting underway. If you want to check and see if your state is one of them and you can vote early, go to vote.org. Check it out. Of course, register to vote and follow our coverage here. We have The Big Vote, our weekly midterm show next Tuesday. We'll be live on the road. Hope you join us. But great to have Jack Date with us. Tara Palmieri here in the briefing room. We'll be back tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern Time, right here at ABC News in Washington. Thanks so much for joining us. See you next time.